All right, Nick, let's talk about the USC Trojans. All right, everybody knows this team is looking good. I think there's a lot of great moves they had, a lot of good recruits, a lot of good, transfers coming into this team, and a new quarterback to boot. I think the team is just looking like they have things in a better headspace. They're going to make a big jump. There's a lot of changes made last year, but I think in particular, you look at the defense, where it was last year to where it's going to be this year. There's going to be a jump, and I think I'm not the only one saying that. Lincoln Riley thinks it as well. We're going to get into that and all of the data as to why that may be the case in just a second here. But first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, a lot of things going on, a lot of changes from year one to year two. Is there going to be a big jump? What are we going to see for this team? And I think specifically on the defensive side of the ball, that's where the most improvement could have been made for the Trojans. We always say this. We think Lincoln Riley's got the offense covered. They're going to figure that out. So let's see the defense. As the defense goes, so does the Trojans. And I think there's going to be a big jump, and so does Riley. Let's get into his comments on the matter, and we'll get into the data of it all on the other side. So this is from over on 3 Sports. It says, Coach Lynn talked about the new defensive coordinator, and our defensive staff did a tremendous job last year, Riley told ESPN's Greg McElroy. Our players, like you said, to make that type of jump, you can talk about it all offseason to hire whoever you want, but to actually go and do it on the field, to go and prove it is another thing, and they did a tremendous job. In year 2, we got 2 reasons to be very optimistic. One is exactly what you said. The scheme is not a new install. There's confidence been built up systematically here. I think it's going to be important both systematically and mentally, the way that you play, expectations, the standards defensively at USC. The second part, which I think is the most important part of it, is talent is going to continue to rise, especially on the defensive front. We all know, obviously, how important it is in the defensive front this year. Frankly, it's going to look a lot different. There's more talent. There's more depth, and it's trending a way that is very exciting for everybody that follows the Trojans. And I think that's the case here. I think this important part is they have been focusing on defense, and we're starting to see the depth build. We're starting to see the talent on the defensive side of the ball build, and it's because of a concerted effort the last couple of years by the Trojans. We see the new coaching staff. That's going to help as well. But I think when you look at the data as far as what they were able to do recruiting-wise on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to start to see a trend. Let's jump into it and we can analyze the data here. This is a chart showing the number of recruits in each class that were defensive players that year. And then you have the orange line that is going up and up, and that shows that defensive PFF grade for that season. In 2022, about 5 players on the defensive side of the ball were recruited in that grade, a little bit over 77 PFF grade there. You look at 2023, again, a jump from 5 to 8. Nothing crazy there, but still, there's somewhat of a rise, and we see a rise in the PFF grade as well. If you're looking right under, I think it's like 77.9 or something like that. Then we jump finally to 2024. What's going on there? We see this is a class that already had 12 recruits in it on the defensive side of the ball. Another big jump there. And look, another jump for the PFF grade, 79.5 there for this team, a really big rise. And what do we see in 2025? Even more. This is a team that already has 13 recruits on the defensive side of the ball coming to LA, coming to the Trojans. I think there's a lot of good stuff to like here. And this is the key. The Trojans have been focusing on defense the last 2 years in particular. Talking about 2024, we can see a pretty big jump, almost doubling the amount of recruits that they had on the defensive side of the ball brought in to this school. Then 2025, they repeat the same success, actually get one more guy in particular. I think we're going to see the trend of the more guys they bring in on the defensive side of the football through recruiting, the better the team's going to get. Because like Lincoln Riley said, the recruits' talent level has gone up. The depth has gone up. When you're bringing in 5 recruits on defense, of course your defense isn't really going to be rejuvenated. There's not going to be a whole lot. When you have I believe 2022, they had the 70th ranked recruiting class that year overall. Not very good when you ask me. They might have the number 1 transfer class, But when you're looking for longevity, recruiting is what you need to look for. And the Trojans weren't getting done. We can see they changed their mindset, they've changed their activities. We see what they're doing now. I think we're going to see a consistent rise again this year in defensive talent, and that should lead to more wins on the board for the Trojans. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Trojans fans, in the comments section below, we're talking about recruiting. We're talking about defensive players on this side of the ball. We're talking about how they're going to impact this team. But when we talk about it, I want to know, what are your thoughts? Who do you think is going to be the most impactful defensive player that they brought in through recruiting this year in this 2025 class? Is it Jakeem Stewart? He's the easy answer there. Or is there someone else you have your eye on that you think is going to be a big time contributor? Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on all of this for the Trojans?
So I really love what Lincoln Riley is doing here, and it's a really smart move. And I think a lot of people kind of undersell it, but it is very easy, and we see it all the time, certainly in college football, where a coach with a certain background and a certain style that they feel comfortable playing just says, "To heck with it. That's who we are. That's who we're going to be." Nick Saban famously for years resisted the spread offense. He wanted to stay with his, that spread hurry up offense. He wanted to stay with his old school power. Eventually, he relented. He realized that's not a way to succeed. I have to get with the time. I have to move away from and recruit outside of how I am comfortable. Lincoln Riley is doing a very similar thing here in terms of putting a lot of effort in getting recruits on the defensive side of the ball. Riley, obviously, is an offensive guy. He's very comfortable. I would argue if you got him in a private situation, he wants to win games 50-47, right? That's just, he wants to play basketball on grass. That's how things went in the Big 12. That's how a lot of times it seemed to go in the Pac 12 sometimes. The reality is you can't win championship football doing that. That's essentially a fact. And you certainly can't even win a lot of conference games in the Big 10 where you got bad weather, you got a lot of great defensive football, you got a lot of opposing offenses that are very happy just running the football, killing the clock, looking at you, Iowa, and it just changes the game stylistically, right? You have to be able to play and win a defensive game, and USC is slowly starting to get that in terms of the talent they have on the roster. Everyone expects immediate results. You bring in a new coach, you fix a new thing, and say, all right, we're going to solve all the problems. The reality is the pipeline in terms of recruits, it takes at least 3 to 4 years for you to recycle the whole style of players you had into a new group of guys. And that's what we're seeing with the USC Trojans. We're seeing the guys cycle out. And this most recent class is the biggest sea change yet. The 2024 class, 2025 will follow a similar front too as well. When you look at what has happened in the Trojans defensively, they're getting better. Their last year in the Pac-12, they gave up 34 points per game. Last year, 24. Is that good enough? Absolutely not. The reality is they're trending in the right direction. The data, no matter how you look at it, whether it's the talent they're bringing in, the emphasis on those recruits, and the results on the field, things are going better right now. They're not where they need to be, but Lincoln Riley isn't looking at an incremental improvement and saying, all right, we're done. We solved that. I'm going to go back to offense now. I'm going to go back to what I want to do. No, he is doubling and tripling down on saying, we are going to commit to defense. And that is just the perfect move to make. That's the right approach to make. And this offseason transformation of Lincoln Riley, again, we'll have to see how it works out on Saturdays, right? We can only go by what we can see so far through these months at this point. But this transformation of Lincoln Riley from being offensive genius, the wonder boy of offensive football, quarterback guru, to being a actually well-rounded coach across the board, building a program, setting up a program for long-term sustained success. That is something that USC, I think, really bet big on when they brought him here from Norman, Oklahoma. I think this is what they were hoping he would become. And we talk about all the time on this channel, players develop. It sounds obvious, right? A guy comes in as a freshman or sophomore, he should develop and get better. But you know who else develops? Coaches. And we look at Lincoln Riley because he's been such a big name for such a long time as a guy who maybe, is what he is. But the reality is coaches can develop. I mentioned Nick Saban. Nick Saban was very late in his career at that point where he said, to heck with it. We're going spread, no huddle, and we're going to play the game everyone else is, and we're just going to be better than everybody else at it. Lincoln Riley, relatively late. I know he's still younger in his career. He's been coaching football and being a head coach, big name programs for a long time. And now this offseason, he has continued and extended the trend of hyper focused on defense. We look at this sea change that Saban made with the Crimson Tide and said that was one of the gutsier, just humbling moves we've ever seen a head coach make at the top of the college football world. I think we're seeing that same kind of move here from Lincoln Riley. And I think the future is very bright for any program, especially a big name, well-funded, historically great program like USC. When you have a head coach that is very smart, which Lincoln Riley obviously is, but is also willing to humble himself to do what is best for the program. A lot of other coaches can't do it. Looking at you, Les Miles, right? Famously, looking at you, Kelly, from Notre Dame down to LSU. How about Jimbo Fisher, famously for Texas A&M, fizzling out there? The reality is, the smart coach who can humble himself and do what's best for his program, good things will happen, and that's exactly what we're seeing out of USC.
Yeah, Nick, I think you're exactly right. And I think it's not just in coaching, it's not just in football. I think that's how the world is in general. When you try to micromanage and when you try to just like dominate something and you don't let the infrastructure you put around you work, that's what happens. When Lincoln Riley can hyper focus on the offensive side of the ball and have everything go in that manner, yeah, you'll get a couple of like first overall quarterbacks who put up a lot of numbers, maybe win a Heisman. But what did you really get out of those guys? Nothing of note, nothing real consequence that people are going to care about. When you start to back off of that approach and let the team develop, let your guys do their jobs, like you said, let the defensive side of the ball flourish some, we're going to start to see a more well-rounded coach. We're going to start to see a better football team. We're not going to see Lincoln Riley team, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's USC, no longer it's going to be like, that's a team you want to look at if you want to see a really great quarterback. There's going to be some good quarterback play there. There's going to be a guy that maybe wins a Heisman. It's going to be fun to watch. No, now we're going to see a Lincoln Riley led team, and you're going to look at it and say, hey, it's a good football team. This is a team that just overall is really sound, really solid. Yeah, they have great quarterback play. The defense is no slouch either. We're just seeing all around a well rounded program. So, like you said, I agree with what you said. I think this is going to be a good step in the right direction for the Trojans. And I think we're going to be excited this year for the Trojans because of the things they talked about. Year 2 in the system. It's no longer the new install. We're going to see a lot more unique stuff. We're going to see this thing flourish, but also the depth that they brought in for this program and the focus they put on the defensive side of the ball is going to be really important as well.
And one final point to end on, because I think you hit on something that's so important. What we see Lincoln Riley doing here with USC, it's not something that's just college programs, college football programs. It's what everything does in the real world organizationally, right? If you're not willing to change who you are and adapt, if you're not willing to evolve, you're going to die. And that's the reality. We see a lot of businesses, right? They sit there and say, you go back 20 years, I'm not going to adopt the internet. I'm not going to adopt email. They're bankrupt. Look at Blockbuster Video, it doesn't exist. They could have bought Netflix. Like, we don't understand what that's all about. They no longer exist. Netflix is massive, right? You see the same thing with artificial intelligence and its propagation, right? There's some companies, some organizations, some people, nothing to do with it. Listen, they're going to die out. The people that embrace the change and are willing to humble themselves and who they are to take on the change, they will be successful. That's what Lincoln Riley is becoming right now. And I think this is a critical inflection point for USC. Obviously, young quarterback in the mix. We're going to have to see how everything shakes out too long term there. But if USC, like you said, and I think you hit it so perfectly there, the evolution of Lincoln Riley and this program from being, hey, you turn on the Trojans to see a lot of offense to, hey, you turn on the Trojans to see a complete football team. That's the difference between being a fun team and a championship team. And that's where USC is right now. They're going away from, hey, they'll score a lot to, hey, they'll win a lot. And Trojans fans, you should be really excited by that.